From the KTVB Newsroom, this is a Decision 2022 special. Live now, team coverage of the Idaho primary election.
And welcome into coverage of the 2022 May Idaho primary. We're going to get to all of that election news and more in a moment. But first, we have some breaking news that we have to get to. We need to tell you there's been an Amber Alert just issued about 25 minutes ago.
Nampa police are searching for two endangered children taken from their school by their biological father. You can take a look at the picture here. These are the missing kids. It'd be 6-year-old Kason Castleman and 8-year-old Zayden Castleman. The police are looking for their father, 27-year-old James Edward Castleman. Police say he's wanted for 3 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor and 2 counts of custodial interference by kidnapping. He is 5'10", 150 pounds. He has brown hair, brown eyes, and he wears glasses.
And this is the car that they believe he is traveling in, they being investigators. It is a 2009 gray Ford Fusion with Idaho license plate 2C VC724. Again, a 2009 gray Ford Fusion that you're looking at there. Now, that car was reportedly last seen in Nampa. Nampa police are asking anyone who has seen the children, the father, or the vehicle to call 911 immediately. People can also leave a tip locally by calling 208-465-2206. Again, a very serious situation here, an Amber Alert out of Nampa, Idaho. We have more details right now at KTVB.com. Again, if you've seen the kids, their father, or this car, you're asked to call 911, and we'll be here live on air throughout the election night, covering the election for you. But Brian, of course, with a serious situation like an Amber Alert, we'll have updates from the community as well as we go through the night.
Anything that comes through us will go out to you immediately here online at KTVB.com. And WARF happens after 10 o'clock. We'll do it on Channel 7. So here is what we're doing right now. This is special election night coverage. We are live at KTVB.com right now. I am Brian Holmes.
And I'm Joe Paris. And the polls in Idaho, they are now closed statewide in all time zones. And now we wait for results to start coming in.
Okay, so the top races that we are following tonight, of course, were the top 5 statewide races. The race for governor, lieutenant governor, there's the secretary of state, there's the superintendent of public instruction, and attorney general. And we have team coverage tonight to cover all of this.
Yes.
We have Doug Petcash and Morgan Romero with the Republicans.
And they are hosting their election night celebration at the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel in downtown Boise. Of course, Tristan Lewis is at the Canyon County Elections Office, and our Andrew Bartline is monitoring things in Ada County.
And of course, as always during election coverage, political analyst Dr. Stephanie Witt is here in studio with us to help break down the results of tonight as those results come in and just kind of give us some details about, well, election season and primaries and kind of the role and how everything kind of plays out and what we can expect possibly to play out through the rest of this evening. So we're going to go out first right now to Doug and Morgan, who are at GOP party headquarters. And still early, I know, results not yet coming in yet, but we should expect those momentarily. But Doug, Morgan, how are things looking down there?
You know what, Brian, I would say that there's kind of a palpable buzz here. I mean, this has been a hotly contested election within the Republican Party this year, and so there are a lot of eyes and maybe hearts beating too, waiting for some of those election results to come in. Quite a good crowd here so far. People are still filling in. There's a lot more on the outside in the lobby here at the Hilton Garden Inn as well.
Right, and a lot of the candidates aren't here right now. They've been trickling in and out of this room. They have suites here on site, or they've rented out other spaces, but this is the state Republican Party's election night party. And so, you know, once we find out, once the AP calls any projected winners, we imagine that some of those that won or that are projected to have won will come down and give speeches down here.
And we have already run into former Congressman Raul Labrador, who is here in one of the suites upstairs, and we've made contact with him about a potential interview later on. Speaker of the House Scott Bedke, running for lieutenant governor, is here, and we're expecting to have an interview with him. And just in a few minutes, Morgan is going to be talking with Idaho GOP Chairman Tom Luna.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we are going to be out here throughout the rest of the evening through this digital newscast as well as on air KTVB starting at 10 p.m. and we'll bring you all the reaction. We expect, as those polls did just close, results to begin trickling in soon. We're going to be hearing from some of the candidates. The Republican Party is so big in Idaho. They have candidates in every single race. Many are unopposed and others are opposed. Incumbents that have been in office for decades being opposed by candidates that maybe have different views than them in this specific race.
And just in a few minutes, the speaker is going to start taking the stage, starting with some of the unopposed candidates and then working back towards some of the bigger races that we've been following. That's it for now from here. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes with Morgan's interview with Tom Luna. Back to you, Brian and Joe.
All right, thank you, Doug Patcash and Morgan Romero. We'll hear from them in a few moments. For now, though, let's send it out to our Tristan Lewis, who is in Canyon County for us this evening. Tristan, the last time we saw you on the KTVB newscast, you were reporting about long lines at polling locations. I'm curious, do you know if people are still standing in line at 8:30, 8:45, waiting to, go and vote?
That's the question of the day, Joe. It has been a pretty busy day here in Canyon County, a lot busier than what Canyon County elections offices predicted, just because of the smaller early voting turnout. There was some pretty long lines, like you mentioned, over at the Middleton Middle School. There was lines just wrapping around the gym. The polls did close about an hour or so ago, so it's going to be interesting to see just how more of the voters come in. I do have a number for you, Joe, just about how many votes did come in today. About 20,000, more than 20,600 votes did come in so far. But like you mentioned, those long lines, there could be more votes coming in. Right now, we have some absentee ballots being counted right now by some election workers. Right now, from what I last heard, they were on precinct 46, and there's 51 precincts in Canyon County. So still a couple more to go through. Still more votes being tallied, of course. Like I said, it's been a lot busier of a day here in Canyon County because last week the early voting, just about 8,000 people did some early voting. They had to bring some more voting machines out to some of those polls. And again, it was just a busy day in Canyon County. We're going to keep you updated on just what the votes look at and keep you here on KTVB.com.
Hey, Tristan, a quick question for you. I know you've been out there in Canyon County for most of the afternoon, but have you seen, is there a time that you could see, how long people had to wait in some of these lines, especially out in Caldwell at the event center?
Yeah, so I actually timed somebody once I got to the Middleton Middle School. I timed somebody. We got there a little before 6 o'clock. I saw them come up to one of the voting polls. Sorry, not 6 o'clock. We came out there just a little before 5 o'clock. Once we were about to do our 6 o'clock hit, around 5:50, that's when I saw them finally get up to one of those voting polls.
So you're saying about 45 minutes or so it took somebody to go from that line. That's quite a bit of time out there.
And I know that, sometimes people will get in a long line like that, Brian, and they'll say, forget it, I'm not going to vote. Tristan, I'm curious, I'm not sure if you saw this. Did you see anybody at the end of the line, maybe look like they got impatient or they had to get going and just leave the gymnasium without voting?
A lot of people are pretty adamant on making sure they're voting. I mean, there was some grumbling just about oh, wow, look at all these big lines. But nobody was really oh, I'm going to step out of line. So a lot of people still there trying to do their civil duty.
All right, thank you very much, Tristan. We'll check back in with you a little later as we get through this evening. Lots to talk about going on in Canyon County. But we're going to bounce out to Andrew Bartline now, who is out at the Ada County Elections Office, where we're seeing some pretty decent numbers coming in from there. Andrew.
Yeah, that's right. Their goal was 30 to 35%. That's the voter turnout that the elections office was hoping to get to. And some preliminary numbers, of course, nothing's final right now. It seems that about 91,000 votes have been casted and counted. That would make up about 31%. So they at least got to the low end of that goal. Now, we've been in close contact with Trent Tribble. He's the deputy chief clerk here at the elections office. And, throughout the day, we're bouncing from poll to poll to poll. We went to more than 10 of them just to see what those lines were looking like. And it's completely different than what Tristan was seeing out in Canyon County. There are almost no lines from the 10 different polls we went to today. People were in and out relatively quickly. We talked with some poll workers. One woman who'd been a poll worker at that specific precinct in Boise for 5 years. She said that the turnout is twice what she normally sees, but that was because of a big swarm in the morning. Once they got through all of them throughout the afternoon, it was a consistent trickle in and out, but it never got to the point where a line was built up. When we talked to Tripple about that, he told us that there's 50 new precincts in Boise, and he really contributes that to cutting down on a lot of these potential long waits in line. So I think the numbers he gave us were 3,000 registered voters per precinct. Well, with adding 50, that number got down to about 1,500. So they cut the number of registered voters in half, roughly, by adding these 50 new precincts. And what we see in this election today, there wasn't a lot of waiting in line, potentially because of that. Absentee ballots could also play a big role. He says Ada County sent out 24,000 absentee ballots. That's more than they typically do, especially for a May primary. Said they've seen between 19,000 to 20,000 of those come back and be counted. So, of course, nothing's final right now. They're still going through these absentee ballots. They're still counting these ballots, but they've met their goal of 30% here in Ada County, and those absentee ballots and splitting up these the number of registered voters per precinct by adding 50 new precincts seems to really cut down on those lines here.
All right, Andrew, I know we'll get back to you as well throughout the evening because lots of numbers are going to be coming in out of Ada County, of course, the populated area in the state. And now joining us is Boise State Professor of Policy and Public Administration. That would be Dr. Stephanie Witt, a political science professor. You've been here many times with us, breaking down these elections, primaries and general elections. But I want to kind of touch on something that Andrew touched on that we were kind of discussing. The lines in Canyon County is something that we probably didn't expect to see because of this whole redistricting thing that we've done. We're supposed to break up some of these larger plots of people. And that's kind of what has happened in Ada County, but not so much in Canyon County.
Well, I think the county clerks are taking a different strategy, a different approach. And you would expect the most lines the election before the redistricting, right? Because that's where growth will distort the differences between the two, the sets of districts and precincts, right? So if a lot of people move into an area and you're the furthest away from the census, that you would expect some lines there. My understanding is that Canyon County decided to decrease the number of voting places, and they went to bigger venues, and so a little bit longer line. It's also a heavily Republican area, and the Republican ballot is a lot longer than the nonpartisan or Democratic ballot in this race, in this primary. So it takes a long time to fill out those, and that may be some of the backup in Canyon County.
Okay, I want to draw your attention to the numbers you're seeing on the bottom of your screen right now. We're starting to get some numbers coming in, and these are all very early numbers. You can see 0% reporting, but there's some numbers coming in, and that will be continually updated throughout the evening here at KTVB.com, and when we get on Channel 7 coming up in about 45 minutes or so. So keep an eye on those numbers. We're going to talk about that, and we'll get over to Joe here in just a moment to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
This is the primary election. This is a big pivotal primary election, especially for the Republican ticket, but this is kind of what the primary does, is kind of separate, or I guess solidify who we will see in the general election.
The point of a primary is to allow the members of the party to pick who they want to be the nominee to be on the general election ballot in November. Okay. So the two parties have gone in different ways to decide that. And over the course of our history, sometimes parties have used caucuses, sometimes they've used the direct primary that we have now. And so the Republicans are using the direct primary, but closing it, which means you have to be a registered member of the Republican Party in order to vote in that primary. So that probably has decreased turnout a little bit from historic levels because it is an extra step, although it's quite painless now. It's all automated, So when you appear at the polls, if you're unaffiliated, you can affiliate as a Republican and vote in that primary if you'd wanted to.
And I'm sure a lot of people went to the polls this morning, this afternoon, and realized, wait a second, I didn't register, I didn't affiliate, but then you just automatically did that. And it's kind of the system, the way it's set up right now.
It is. Now, if you were registered as a Democrat and you showed up this morning, you could vote in either the unaffiliated or the Democrat primary, but not the Republican.
Exactly. All right, we got lots more to talk about. We've got a lot of time left here. But again, with the numbers on the bottom of your screen, we're going to take this time to go over to Joe Paris over there, chief political reporter, who's got the breakdown of how things are looking via our website right there.
Yes, and actually this is the Ada County Elections website that I'm pulling up here, and if our team in the back actually wants to take this full, we'll show you there. This is actually some very preliminary results just out of Ada County. We're just going to show you the governor's race right now. Again, these are just the numbers coming in on early voting, but two things I want to circle for you, knowing that it's a way too early to give analysis time. Brad Little is out in front with technically about 2/3 of the early vote in Ada County. He has about 4,500 votes out of the first batch that has been counted. In second place, right behind him right now, is his lieutenant governor, Janice McGean. She is by far and away got the most votes at second place. Ed Humphreys, third right there. We're keeping an eye on those three in the governor's race. But as you can see here, the early returns in Ada County, of course, the most populated county in the state of Idaho, does have Governor Little out early. This is, again, the votes that have been tallied just from early voting. So if you went and did any of the early voting mobile truck, or if you went to the Ada County Elections Office and voted early, they were just waiting and sitting on these results till just after 9 o'clock. They've had them in the system. They've had them calculated. So now they can actually publish them since the polls are closed across Idaho. Again, Brad Little out in front to start the night, Brian.
And I want to point out also across the top of that, absentee ballots. This does not include absentee ballots.
Correct.
Just yet.
Correct. We'll get those absentee numbers probably in the next 15 to 45 minutes. I know that's a big range I just gave you, but those early votes are a lot easier to get out. Those absentee ballots, they have to flatten and process, and it takes a little more time to get them in the system.
And were they only allowed to start that today?
Correct.
That's a good clarification. All right, thank you very much, Joe. Okay, now we're going to go back out to GOP party headquarters right now. GOP headquarters. Morgan Romero is out there, and she has Tom Luna standing next to her. Morgan.
Yes, I am joined with Idaho GOP Chairman Tom Luna. Tom, this night has been something you guys have been looking forward to and working towards for a very long time.
Yeah, we've been anxiously anticipating this night so that we can realize who our nominees will be at the state level and then move forward towards the general election in November.
Historically in the state of Idaho, we talk about this a lot at KTVB. The Republican Party is very dominant. Oftentimes, the people who win the primary elections go on to win the general elections in the state of Idaho, in considering the big statewide races. We have some here, though, that are unopposed.
Yeah, we have, I think state treasurer and state controller, Brandon Wolf and Julie Ellsworth, there's no opposition in the primary. I anticipate there will be opposition in the general election, but they're running unopposed. Right. All the other state candidates, statewide offices, are very contested races, and we're just starting to now get numbers in. We'll see how this night goes, but yeah, it's not common for us to have this many highly contested races at the top of the ticket.
Elaborate a little bit on that. We're talking lieutenant governor, governor, superintendent, AG, secretary of state.
Yeah, all those.
Yeah, you have and a lot of big names, people who have served in public office prior too.
Yeah, Attorney General is a great example. You've got Lawrence Watson that people have elected numerous times over the past 20 years, and you have Raul Abador that's been elected a number of times in Idaho, and people have voted for both of them at the same time on the same ticket, and now they have to choose between those two. Right, so it just creates different dynamics. What I am convinced as I travel around the state is that the Republicans agree on 80% of our policies and issues, but we have primaries to debate the 20% where we don't agree. If we agreed on 100%, there'd be no reason to have primaries. This year, we've had a lot of passionate debate about that 20% where we don't agree. But tomorrow morning, we'll unite, as we always do, and we'll go on to victory in November.
Now that you say that, I do want to piggyback off of that. The Republican Party has been very fractured, fissured in ways with different belief systems on that end of the spectrum. How do you unite your party should one, perhaps more moderate candidate win versus the further right candidates?
Yeah, I think what Republicans recognize is the biggest threat is not their fellow Republican. It is the agenda of the very liberal socialist agenda of Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. That will unite us, right? We will debate the 20% that we don't agree on during the primary, but we'll definitely unite because we recognize that the real threat is not our fellow Republican, but it is the agenda of the far left.
What's your plan for tonight? You've got speakers starting here in about 15 minutes. Yeah. Perhaps those that were unopposed, some acceptance speeches, maybe? Yeah, we'll hear from Brandon Wolf and Julie Ellsworth. Russ Fulcher has a taped interview because he had to stay in D.C. for some votes. I think Mike Crapo's in the same predicament. So some of those races, either they're unopposed or we anticipate to be able to call early. Others, we'll be here a few hours before we know the winners. Yeah, just a few. And again, those results are projected. They're not official for several more days. So we'll keep our eye on that. But Idaho GOP Chairman Tom Luna, thank you for joining us, and we'll check in with you in a bit. All right, thank you. All right, Brian and Joe, we'll send it back to you. All right, thank you very much, Morgan. Those are good points that Mr. Luna brought up there. And that Unity rally, as we mentioned, should be an interesting one tomorrow morning. We'll see how that plays out. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the governor's race. Sure. Which is obviously on everybody's mind, a lot of people's mind. A lot of candidates on the Republican ticket especially running for this race. And it is an interesting one because for the first time in I don't know how long, you know this more than anybody. Well, apparently the first time since, or maybe one time since 1932. That we've had a governor and lieutenant governor from the same party now facing each other in a gubernatorial election. Right. This is not
typical.
Right.
It is clear evidence of a deep divide in the party. And yeah, it's upsetting too that plans for the Unity rally, I'm sure. You know, you probably could have crossed that off the day that the Lieutenant Governor filed to run for governor, you know, that Unity is going to be a hard stretch. But that's the old tradition of Ronald Reagan, who, of course, insisted that you never speak ill of the other members of the party. The idea is after the primary, everybody, you know, holds hands and says, we're going to win as a team.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that will happen tomorrow. We'll see. But, you know, I think that the divisions that her running against the sitting governor from the same party brings up are pretty deep. And it's going to be hard to make friends and go forward.
Yeah, it will be interesting, especially knowing all of the things that led up to this day between the two of them.
Yeah, I don't think this really makes the Democrat candidate for governor super competitive. I just think it shows the deep divisions in the party.
And you can see some of the updated numbers there on the GOP race for governor. 66% right now for Brad Little, 21% for Janice McGeachin, Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin, and Ed Humphreys pulling in about 10% so far. Again, very early numbers. We'll keep tabs on that as we get through the rest of the evening, but we're going to go out to Canyon County now. Tristan Lewis has an update on what's happening out there in the 2C. Tristan?
Hey there, Brian. Yeah, we're still here in Canyon County at the Canyon County Elections Office. Like we've been mentioning, it's been long lines all day, a lot of busy polling places, but there was a reason for that. We mentioned that early voting was smaller turnout than what the Canyon County Elections Office expected, so they just weren't prepared for that. But I'm being joined right now with Joe Decker with Canyon County. Like we said, busy election day. What were some of the other reasons why these lines were taking so long?
Well, I think, you know, COVID and some of the DOJ requirements for polling places, we haven't been able to get back into some of the polling locations that we originally had. So we had 21 polling locations. Normally we'd have more. So we had consolidated ones where there were several precincts in one, which helped lead to the longer lines. And then I think the Republican ballot was a lot longer than people thought. So it was taking people a considerable amount of time once they were checked in to actually vote through the ballot, and that's kind of where the holdup was that we thought. And then we also had some poll workers who decided not to show up today, so that also put a kink in things.
Yeah, I was at some of the polling places. I was at Middleton Middle School around 6 o'clock. It saw somebody that took them about 50 minutes to actually cast their vote. Did you guys run into any trouble with just people getting into arguments or maybe just wanting to step out of line during some of those polling places?
I hadn't heard anything about that, but again, people, you know, we try to promote early voting, absentee voting, but people want that election day experience, and that election day experience involves lines, crowds. You know, some people upset that they're waiting in line. So, you know, again, we had 90 hours of early voting the last 2 weeks, and we had a little over 3,000 people vote in it, and we had 3,000 people vote by 10 o'clock today. So, I mean, it was the more people that vote early, the better the election day experience is for everybody else.
Do you guys have a number of how many people actually came out to the polls today?
It has to be over 20,000, probably 20, 21, 22,000, somewhere around there, I would guess. So we're up about 27, 28% total voter turnout. So pretty good turnout for a primary.
Yeah, you guys tell me that you guys try to shoot for that 25, 30%. So that's right in the middle.
Yeah, right in the middle. I mean, our last primary, I think we were 17, 18%. So anytime we can get above 25 to 30 in a primary is great. I mean, if you go back to the all-male absentee primary that happened like right when COVID first started, that was like 46, 47%. That's the highest we've ever had for a primary. So yeah, it was a pretty good election today.
I mean, last November we had that election. There were some hardware issues. Today we're just seeing some long lines. Any victories today just with just how all the elections rolled out, how the voting polls rolled out?
I think, you know, credit to the poll workers who did show up, our election staff. You know, we have a pretty small staff here, and they've busted their butts, and they've done everything they could. So a victory for our elections office.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost 9:30. We got some big smiling faces still as we count these final absentee ballots. So big shout out to the poll workers today. I'm going to toss it back to you, Brian and Joe.
All right, thank you very much. Tristan, I want to ask you, Dr. Witt, about the turnout. 20 to 25%. They were expecting a little bit more than that. Is that impressive for Canyon County?
Well, I mean, wouldn't it be great if it was as much as voted in the presidential elections, right? So it depends on how you look at it. Looking at the long term, 30% is about, where we tend to trend with turnout in primary elections. Now, given that really all the action in Canyon County is going to be on the Republican primary, and a lot of important decisions there, you might expect turnout to be a little higher than it is. But I'm always pleased when there's a lot of people showing up to vote.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the difference between the in-person voting,
Sure.
and the early voting. And of course, Canyon County is a heavy Republican stronghold, and we've heard a lot from Republicans since the 2020 election that they want in-person voting with ID, none of this drop-off ballots and vote by mail and everything. So I'm not surprised that they had a lot of people show up on the day of the election.
Interesting fact that Joe Decker said that in those 90 hours of early voting, they had 3,000 votes or so.
Yeah.
In the 2 hours today, they had just as many.
Yeah, I assume that the county will reconsider, was that a good use of staff time to have 90 hours and get 3,000 people versus the turnout today?
All right. Okay, so there's another updated numbers. Can we go back to that really quickly? I mean, updated, it is still very early when it comes to the governor's race, which is, okay, we won't go back to that. But we will do this. We will go out to Andrew Bartline out at the Ada County Elections Office with an update on what's happening down there. Andrew.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. I'm here with Trent Triple, the Chief Deputy Clerk. I'm glad I got that right. I've been struggling with that one all day. Here in Ada County, so we know the turnout so far has been pretty decent. We've made that 30% goal, correct?
That's correct. We're at 31% right now.
And 30 to 35% is really what you guys have been aiming for. Are these numbers close to being finalized, or are more trickling in?
There's a few more. We've picked up the last of the absentee ballots. Those will be processed here in the next couple of hours from the drop boxes and the Postal Service. And then we're getting all the chief judges driving back in now with the precinct results.
And you mentioned those chief judges driving back in with those precinct results. I mean, there's a line of cars coming out of this parking lot, and you can't process those quite instantly. Do we have an estimated timeline on what we're looking at here tonight?
Well, we're hoping close to about 11:30 we'll have all of the ballots back in, and hopefully, if things go well, by midnight we'll have all of our results posted.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on that maybe we didn't ask you about how this process goes? You mentioned earlier off air, it's kind of a madhouse inside there. What's going on exactly?
Yeah, well, we have a bunch of volunteers in there right now, county workers as well, processing all the equipment, the ballots that are coming back in. We're also verifying all of the absentee and early voting results. I believe those have been posted just a few minutes ago from Ada County, and then throughout the rest of the night, we'll get the precinct results, and those will be tabulated along with the absentee and early voting.
And with those absentee ballots, you told us 24,000 have been sent out for this election, higher than you normally see, 19 to 20,000. Is that still what it's looking at the percentage that have been returned?
It's about 19 to 20,000. We'll know for sure in about an hour when we get a grasp on what came back from the drop boxes at 8 o'clock.
Perfect. Thank you, Trenton. First, I want to pan over here. If our photojournalist, John Mark, can turn the camera, you can see those taillights. I mean, there's just a line of cars coming in, and those are the chief judges from those precincts that are driving these ballots back in. And Trent told me a moment ago that it can take 40 minutes for them to get through this line. So, I mean, it's backing out to, the street, really. I believe that's Benjamin at that intersection. So, as long as they're here, it seems that we're going to be here. It's going to take a while for these ballots to come through and all get processed.
Yeah, Andrew, you can see why this isn't just an instantaneous process where you put a vote in and it goes through a computer system and all of a sudden it's tallied.
Right.
It takes a little bit of time, especially when we still drive ballots to the elections office.
Well, we do, and the last national election made us very aware of issues around security and election integrity, so I think they're being extra careful to make sure their processes are transparent and defensible, and they're going to take their time and get it right.
All right, so you're seeing the numbers across the bottom of your screen at KTVB.com right now. You can see we're looking at the Wasden race, Attorney General race with Wasden there, Critchfield, and the Superintendent of Public Instruction, 45% for Debbie Critchfield, House position 35A. Those are going to cycle through and update as frequently as possible. We want to get over to Joe Paris right now, over on that side of the room where he's looking at some of the, or looking at our website, but looking at some of these statewide numbers coming in.
Yeah, and a few moments ago, we were just talking about the governor's race, and the other statewide races, we're now getting some, again, very preliminary results. Again, we talked about the governor's race. We see Governor Little out in front there of McGeehan and Humphreys. Let's take a look, though, of the lieutenant governor race here. Right now, House Speaker Scott Bedke is up, I guess, about 1,000 votes to be exact. You can see here that we have the percentages, but you can see the exact votes, about 1,000 vote difference between Bedke and Giddings, which is interesting. Noted political rivals over the last several months. They were closely together in the legislature. This is a very heated and really highly contested race. We see, though, Bedke taking a quick lead here tonight. Again, most of these are likely from early voting. Maybe we're starting to see a little bit of the absentee returns. Secretary of State race here on the Republican side. Of course, we had the debate here. You can see Ada County Clerk Phil Mcgrain in the lead there with about 52% of the vote so far, about 600 votes ahead of Dorothy Moon. Again, this is just from pretty preliminary results, so don't take this to the bank. We got a long night ahead of us. Attorney General's race, you see Lawrence Wasden, the incumbent, ahead by about 2,000 votes, a little less than that, over Raul Labrador, former Idaho congressman. And then finally, at the very bottom, another debate that we had here at KTVB, Superintendent of Public Instruction. We'll take a look here. It's going to be a pretty close race, we think, between Critchfield and Ibarra. You see Brandon Durst there on the bottom of our screen. About a 400 vote difference between Critchfield and Ibarra at this hour. Again, there's only been 3,000 votes total counted in this race. You can see right there. So this is a very preliminary result, Brian, but it is interesting as we're starting to get the returns, and you may take notes tonight on what you're seeing here early. You can start to see trends, Brian, between what the early voters and what the absentee ballot voters were doing versus the people that go to the polls. So as we go through these results early here tonight, think back to these in a few hours, and it makes you wonder, do the people who go to the polls have a different voting preference?
That's true, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, but I just want to also be very clear. For those of you watching at KTVB.com, we're going to do an update breaking in to Channel 7 KTVB coverage here in about a minute and a half or so, so we don't have a whole lot of time. I don't want to get too heavy into it, but for those at KTVB.com, if I start talking about something else entirely, you'll understand why, just to be clear about that. So this is, yes, as Joe mentioned, this is kind of how things go. Those who vote early kind of go a different direction sometimes. Well, I wouldn't say always, or I wouldn't say a different direction, but there's a tendency for early voters to do what kind of Joe mentioned, right? Mm-hmm. A little bit?
Yeah, I don't know anymore. Let me say it that way, because I think that they were more predictable before the pandemic. The pandemic has habituated us to being able to vote in different ways, and so we have people who may have become comfortable with early voting that hadn't previously. So I'm not sure what to make of it, but let's see how it goes.
That's how we're going to do for the rest of the night, is see how it goes. And we're going to keep updating those numbers at the bottom of your screen, so keep tabs on that. Again, these are all very preliminary early numbers, less than 1% reporting on some of these district Senate seats and House seats going around the districts, 35 of those. But I'm going to take a break right now from our coverage here at KTVB.com because we are going to do an update at Channel 7. So stay with us. We'll be right back in about 30 seconds. So bear with us here in just a moment.
Tonight on the News at 10.
All right, coming up in just about 30 minutes or so, we're going to have an update on the elections, obviously primary election tonight. This is an update right now when it comes to the state governor's race. Brad Little leading at 62% over Lieutenant Governor Janice Mcgrain at 24%, Ed Humphreys at 11%. These are early numbers. You can see just about 20,000 votes, 3% of the state reporting right now. But stay tuned to KTVB.com for updated numbers, and we'll see you at 10. Okay, we are back. So we just saw an update there on the governor's race across the state. 3% reporting. Yeah. It looks like Governor Little kind of has a sizable lead at this point, but again, it's still early.
Well, it is early, but we would expect the incumbent to have an advantage. He clearly has a monetary advantage. The last time I looked, he had about twice the amount of donations that the lieutenant governor had amassed. So, I would expect him to do well. We don't know exactly which parts of the state this slim number we're talking about are from. Of course, the lieutenant governor is from Idaho Falls. She may do better, in that part of the state. Brad Little is more familiar to voters in the Treasure Valley. He's a native of Emmett. So we'll see if as we broaden the counties that are reporting in, we may see a little bit of a surge here or there. But I would be surprised to see his lead vanish completely, but we'll see how it goes.
And I know we'll get into this throughout the evening, but I kind of want to touch on, at least get it started, this conversation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of eyes on the state of Idaho tonight from around the country.
Yeah.
A lot of people saying the way this race is shaping up with the primary, the Republican primary, is kind of a litmus test on how some other states may be able to do it. Whatever happens here, basically, whether the direction of the Republican Party could help other states determine how they do it.
Yeah, I think this is a dynamic that other states are also facing, where there is a, I guess, further right faction within the Republican Party that is more tuned to, well, one, loyalty to Trump and to the culture war issues, as opposed to the more traditional bread and butter jobs, fiscal concern, low taxes kind of Republicans, right? And so if, for example, the lieutenant governor won the governor's nomination, and if Priscilla Giddings won the lieutenant governor nomination, that would be a big sign that that far-right faction of the party has been successful in convincing the base that they should be in charge.
So the point is, we're not the only ones watching this and seeing how this plays out tonight. There's a lot of people around the country who are watching how this plays out here in Idaho. We're going to go over to GOP headquarters right now, where Doug Petcash is standing by with one of those candidates for one of those positions. Doug?
That's right, Brian. I am here with Speaker of the House, Republican Scott Bedke, running for Lieutenant Governor this year, of course. Speaker Bedke, first of all, you know, it's been about 6 weeks since the end of the legislative session. Has it felt like it's only been 6 weeks until this night?
It seems like it's longer. We have been going hard, morning, noon, and night every day since we got out, and we were doing quite a bit in the evenings during the session. So, you know, I think there's a sense of relief that it's finally over, but we have been all over the state, from north to south and east to west, and you know, the one thing that we hear everywhere is don't let our Idaho change. We don't want to wake up 10 years from now or even next year and wonder where our Idaho went. You know, we put together the best state in the nation to live, to work, and to raise a family, and everybody wants that to, if you've been here for a long time, you want that to not change, and if you're moving in, that's why you came.
How different was this for you? You're running for a statewide office.
Right.
As Speaker, you're elected by your peers.
Right.
And, you know, you just have to win your legislative district. So how different of an experience has this been for you?
Well, it's like a legislative race on steroids and then some. I mean, there's really nothing to compare it to. You're going 100% of the time, all the time. You have to have a larger staff. They choreograph every move you make, and but that's been one good thing is, man, my staff has been good, and I think we've done a good campaign.
We're looking at the numbers, right? Oh, they just went down. The early numbers so far with several thousand votes in it. It has you at 64%. So many votes to be counted yet. But how do you feel about your chances tonight of pulling out the victory?
Well, I think my chances are very good. You know, but there's really no way. You know, this is the ultimate poll here. There's, you know, people do polling, and, you know, organizations do polling, but, you know, this is the real poll tonight.
I'm curious, sir, as Speaker of the House, you have quite a bit of power to, you know, manage the legislation, to wrangle the caucus and all of that. How much of a difference do you think you can make as a lieutenant governor as opposed to being Speaker?
Well, my vision of the lieutenant governorship is one of being an ambassador for the state of Idaho. I know the process. I know the conflicts that we're going to have going forward, whether they're in education or tax policy, natural resources, from top to bottom. I think I can be a real asset to the governor and to the cabinet as Idaho transitions into a state that has been discovered. We have been discovered, and there's no going back. And we're going to have conflict in in all of these various areas. There's going to be competition for every gallon of water in the rivers. There's going to be competition for every lane mile. There's going to be competition for every desk in all of the schools, and we've got to be making careful investments back into each of those areas.
I got one final question for you. As Speaker, of course, you had to build consensus.
Right.
You dealt firsthand with the rift in the Republican Party in terms of the farther right candidates and the more central or traditional Republicans, if that's the word you want to use. How do you feel about the status of the Republican Party in Idaho right now?
Well, obviously the rift is there. But there are certain things that unite us. It doesn't matter which side of the rift or which side of the issues you're on. All of us want our kids to leave Idaho schools well educated. All of us want to have good roads and good bridges and an adequate water source, and we start there. Those are the things that unite us, and let's start there and work out. We all agree that we should always live within your means as a taxpayer. Those are places we can start, and we build from there.
All right, Mr. Speaker, best wishes tonight. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug. We'll be here all night.
Okay, sir, we'll talk to you a little bit later. So there you hear it from the Speaker of the House on his bid for Lieutenant Governor. Joe and Brian?
He will be there all night. We're going to be here all night. Thank you very much, Doug. Now, I want to give you an update because when we started this broadcast at KTVB.com, we talked about an Amber Alert that had been issued about an hour ago. Well, those two children have been found safe.
Great.
We've been updated just a few minutes ago that those two children that were taken from their school in Nampa have now been found safe. And so that's the update. It's the only information we have at this point, but we wanted to let you know that the Amber Alert, those kids have been found safe.
Oh,
which is
that's
good news.
relief.
Yep. All right, Joe, I want to bring you into this a little bit more because we're starting to see a few more numbers come in around from other areas of the state.
Yes, I don't have an exact, declaration here on where the exact precincts are coming in right now, but you can see here in our data that 62 out of the 984 precincts are reporting now for the governor's race. That's 6%. So again, this is very early, but with 6% reporting, you can see here that Governor Little is now about 10,000 votes ahead of Lieutenant Governor Janice McGean, and he's about 13,000 ahead of Ed Humphreys. So you can see here that there's a gap that's starting to develop between Little and some of his challengers. Again, this is only 6% reporting, but it'll be interesting to see if Governor Little's lead will extend or if we'll start to see people cutting into his lead. Let's take a look at some of these other statewide races. You just saw the Lieutenant Governor race on your screen. Again, Bedke leads that early. Let's look at some other statewide races, though, real quickly. And again, we will get to some of the legislative races later on, but the data just not there yet, so we'll be patient. But it looks like at this hour, it is pretty close still in the Secretary of State's race. You can see here, Ada County Clerk Phil Mcgrain has a narrow lead over State Representative Dorothy Moon. It's a 4% difference here, but more importantly is what we're looking at here. We're going to see if this changes much, but right now this is really only about 300, 400 votes, so there's a little bit of a gap in between them. You can see here, though, State Senator Mary Souza is trailing pretty significantly here, so quickly this is turning into a two-candidate race very early on. Again, two more statewide races for you that we're keeping a close eye on, and I know a lot of people at home are wondering what will happen in the Attorney General's race because you have the unique circumstance here where you have a several-term incumbent in Lawrence Wasden who does lead the race right now. You can see he has 49%. But Raul Labrador, former Idaho congressman, he has a ton of name recognition, and he has a lot of supporters across the state of Idaho. He does trail right now, but really only about 1,000 votes. And it may sound like a lot, but when it comes down to things, and again, talking about early voting numbers and everything coming together right now, it's a pretty narrow vote there, but we'll keep a close eye on that one. There are some picking Labrador to win that race. We'll find out here in a matter of hours. Hopefully, you never know, could be a long night. And then finally, Superintendent of Public Instruction. When we checked in a short time ago, it did look like it was pretty close between Critchfield and Ybarra. With only 1% reporting, Debbie Critchfield does lead that race by a pretty healthy margin by about 2,000 votes. Brian, Dr. Witt, this is a pretty early analysis, but as we've really watched these election nights over the past several years, you'll sometimes see these candidates start to jump out early in the night, and then they kind of just hold on to that lead, and you'll watch kind of the candidates chip away. So we're going to see if that's the case here tonight. I do want to say I am checking other races. We are keeping an eye on other, non-statewide races of interest that we know at home people want to know about. just waiting for some of those numbers to come in. We know that Canyon County and Ada County, they have a lot of work to do tonight, but as soon as they get the results in, we have them populated for you.
All right, thanks, Joe. Any of those numbers kind of stand out to you, or that you're kind of keeping a closer eye on, Dr. Witt?
Well, I do think the Attorney General race and the Superintendent of Public Instruction are two where there are three major candidates for the Republican nomination. And they're all credible candidates, right? That they have political experience, they're getting a lot of visibility. So I think it's possible that Wasden is going to have a real challenge from former Congressman Labrador. He has a lot of name recognition. He not only was a member of Congress, but he also has been a state party head, right? So he's well known to Republican voters. And in the Superintendent of Public Instruction race, again, the incumbent is being challenged. And I think that the more traditional Republicans that we heard about from the Speaker,
Speaker of the House, yes,
right, are going to probably split between Ybarra and Critchfield, and that may leave an opening for Brandon Durst to do better than he might otherwise.
Okay. I think it's worth, and this is probably a good time to do this, to talk about, we're focusing a lot on the GOP races this year. This is a big deal because why? I mean, why? There's not a whole lot of noise coming from the Democratic side.
Well, yeah, I mean, the purpose of a primary is to narrow down the number of people who want to run for an office in a particular party. And the Democrats just don't have very many races where there are more than one person running for that seat. So there's nothing really to talk about yet. I mean, as we get to the general election, we'll be able to talk about that. There's one major exception, and that's, of course, the mayor of Sandpoint, Shelby Rongstad, trying to run as a write-in candidate for governor because his filing papers got messed up because he's registered to vote as a Republican. So he's running a write-in campaign in the hopes that will happen. Otherwise, there's nothing going on much on the Democratic side. We've talked about this before. There are 59 legislative seats where there's not even a Democrat on the ballot.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
It's a large swath. But going back to the Democratic gubernatorial race, I mean, that's something we may not even know the answer. We won't know the answer to that race tonight because of that write-in candidate. That's
correct. Those have to be processed by hand, and it's going to take more time. And, it's hard enough to get people to show up. It's hard enough to get them to vote, and then to write your name in a way that they can discern your intent was to say Shelby Rongstad, right? So
there's a couple silent letters in there, too.
There is. And so we'll see how that goes. It has happened in other states. Lisa Murkowski, for example, was successful running as a write-in candidate in Alaska.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, speaking of that process, I think, are we going to go out to Andrew Bartline right now, who's at the Ada County Elections Office? He's got a little bit of a breakdown of how that process is working as it is happening. Andrew?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Brian, if you're anything like me, when you do something, you want it to happen instantly and quick. We spoke earlier. This is not a quick process. It's that way inherently. It's that way on purpose. So if you're wondering what happens to your ballot after you cast it, in Ada County, we can break that down for you right now. John Mark, if you want to step in and show in that back room, that's what they're doing. They're processing the ballots right now that are coming in. Now, if you're wondering where are they coming in from, well, let's take a step outside, John Mark. Follow me, friends. So there is a string of cars. These are the chief judges at your precinct. So if you showed up to vote at the polls or you dropped it off at an absentee ballot box, the ballot needs to get here somehow, right? So there's a string of cars, and these are all from different precincts, the precinct chief judges, I should say, and they load up these ballots, put them in their car, and then they got to bring them and drive them here. So if we just take a couple more steps up, we can show you in both directions how long the string of cars is, and we've been told it can take 40 minutes for a car to get through this process. So there are multiple different lines. There's one right next to us. John, Mark, if you want to pan up to the side, there's another one further up. If we go back down this way, it's further down even more. Now there's a Jeep back there that's just making the turn. When that Jeep pulled in here, that was at 9:28. I think it's been almost 20 minutes now, so that car still has this whole stretch to go, and then it's got to turn the corner before they can grab it and start processing that ballot. So, Brian, this is not a fast system. It's going to take some time, and as long as these cars are here, we're not going to know how this whole thing panned out.
And with gas prices these days, Andrew, oh my goodness, I can only imagine how much it's costing those people to sit in line right now. That is amazing. All right, that's a great breakdown. Thank you very much, Andrew. We're going to go out now to the GOP headquarters again. Morgan Romero standing by with one of the candidates for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Morgan.
Yes, I am standing here with Debbie Critchfield. Debbie, as you said, is running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And Debbie has two opponents in this race, incumbent Sherry Ibarra, as well as Brandon Durst, who is a former Democratic state senator in the state of Idaho. Debbie, I've got to ask you first and foremost, how are you feeling tonight?
I am super excited. This day could not come soon enough. There's a great energy in the room. Today was just a satisfying day of being able to go and vote, and the work's been done, and now the voters are going to speak.
Polls are obviously closed at this point. You've been watching the results come in, I'm sure, very closely.
Oh, absolutely. And getting little updates just every few minutes. My family is here, and of course our campaign team and other friends, and it's exciting.
Debbie, you were on the State Board of Education. In fact, you served as president. What do you think you can do differently in this role than you did in State Board of Education?
Well, first of all, I think the leadership for setting the vision of where we want to go for K-12. You've got direct control over how you request money through the budget, how you support, how the State Department of Education supports the work that's being done. And I think that the leadership piece is just a huge part of what I believe has been missing.
I know it's difficult to hear and talk over these voices. We've got a lot of speakers behind us right now at this Idaho GOP party, but how do you differ from your candidates, Superintendent Ibarra as well as Brandon Durst?
I'm going to roll it up into one word, and that's leadership. I think over the last year, specifically the last few months, we've heard a lot about what I have done, what I'd like to do, what I think needs to be done. For me, it comes down to who can get that job done, who has got the relationships, the trust, the skills to be able to really move us forward in Idaho in the ways that's going to create the system that we want.
And what if you don't win? How would you move forward?
I'll continue to be an advocate for education, regardless of the role or the place that I'm in or how that turns out. I will continue to champion that in our state and to work to support communities and kids.
And I think one of the themes we've been talking about a lot here at KTVB throughout the campaign season is just how divided the Republican Party is right now. If you do win, how do you unify Idahoans?
Well, I believe that the message that I have is one of those unifying pieces, that we support kids, we support teachers, we're supporting parents, and that we get on board with how we have our students prepared. And I believe that in itself is a unifying point. And then again, having those relationships, whether it's with the legislature or business leaders or locally elected officials, that here's the outcomes that we're striving for. Let's work together to get that done.
Okay, Debbie, thank you for your time. Last question for you. What are you going to do the rest of the evening?
We're going to keep watching the updates, and I'm sure we'll eat a lot of snacks. And just, you know what, have a good time. This is the result, the culmination of a long year's worth of work, and just enjoy this time with my family.
Wonderful. Debbie Critchfield, candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. We will send it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Morgan. I just want to let everybody know, watching at KTVB.com, we got about 5 more minutes left in this streaming. We're going to talk about this, but we're going to pick it back up at KTVB starting at 10 o'clock. But just to give you a heads up, about 5 more minutes here at KTVB.com. And I want to get over to Joe Paris now, standing by. You said you have some interesting new numbers or new information coming out of Ada County.
Yes, these are some Ada County races, and I want to tell everyone at home something. I heard something said on television today during a report from Katya Stepovic. A man told her in his report, I didn't vote because I didn't think my vote would count. Let's take a look at some really big Ada County races here, and for, I don't know, Ada County Commissioner, for example, Sharon Ullman and Tom Daly are within 3 votes of each other. This is a major position at a county-wide level. Again, this is just the primary, but these are people that have a major impact on major decisions in a place called Ada County, where we live, where we're broadcasting right now. There's only 3 votes in between that. Again, this is super early in the evening, and I'm just trying to make a point here because I have some convenient data. But the point is your vote does count. Meanwhile, though, as we see, Ullman and Daly are very close. Those are pretty regular names you might recognize from Ada County. Over in the corner race, again, this is a 50-50 split between Rich Rifle and Sherry Durst. And then down at the bottom, this is a really interesting race that we've been tracking actually for several months. The current Ada County Sheriff, Matt Clifford, was installed as sheriff after the former stepped down, and there was a special election between Matt Clifford and his challenger tonight, Doug Trauble. You can see here Matthew Clifford. He won back several months ago in the special election. He leads about in a 2-to-1 ratio over Trauble here, 64% to 36%. He's got about a 3,000 vote lead. We're watching this closely, Brian, but again, I want to go back to the point I made a moment ago. Every vote counts, and it is not out of the question, and we see it almost every cycle, a very close race.
I want to make that clear, though. Not a special election for that sheriff spot. That was appointed by the county commissioners.
Oh, you're right.
And so that's why it just kind of, but to reiterate how important these local races are, because as we know, Dr. Witt, the county commissioners have had some significant input on a couple of decisions over these last couple of months when it comes to the sheriff and also who sits on the Central District Health Board or any health board when it comes to that. So these smaller, more localized elections are just as important as presidential.
Well, it is a local election, but this is the largest county in the state, and
right.
A sizable percentage of everybody who lives in Idaho lives in Ada County. So what goes on in Ada County is very important, and I would guess that the county's budget and the number of people who work for it rivals many state agencies and dwarfs them. So it is an important seat. And I think we're starting to see some of the dynamic I've seen in other western states, like in Nevada, where the people who run for the Clark County Commission in Las Vegas, right, are former legislators. Then it's actually, there's more going on. There's more power in those big county races. And so you will sometimes see, instead of the county person going to run for the legislature, now we're seeing legislators returning to run for county office.
Realizing they have more of an input on your day-to-day lives and things that happen. Yeah, exactly. That is interesting, kind of see how that plays out. As you said, in other states, seeing some of that here in Idaho as well. So just a reminder, we've got a couple minutes left here at KTVB.com. Then coming up at 10 o'clock, we are going to take it from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. We're going to have updated numbers with Joe over there on the screen. We're going to have the numbers continuing on the bottom of the screen here. We're also going to go and check in with GOP headquarters. We've got Tristan Lewis out there, Andrew Bartline out there as well, but Morgan and Doug at GOP. And then at some point, I believe, we're going to check in with the Democratic Party, who's got a setup somewhere. We'll see how that kind of plays out. But as we mentioned earlier, that's kind of a smaller soiree than we're seeing, but that's because, well, this is Idaho.
That's correct. Not as many contested races.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the meantime, you're seeing some of those numbers coming through, and I think we even have an update on the governor's race, I do believe, right? Let's get to that if we can show some of those latest numbers here when it comes to who is leading in the Republican side of the primary when it comes to for governor. We got those numbers to bring up there. All right, you've seen some of those House positions and Senate positions coming across the bottom. Again, these are early numbers, very early numbers. The polls closed about 2 hours ago in the southern part of the state, about an hour ago in the northern half of the state, so we're still seeing some of these numbers come in. Only about 5% reporting for lieutenant governor position. Bedke leading at 61%, Giddings with 33%. These are your latest governor races on the Republican side with Brad Little, the incumbent, Governor Little, 65%. 33,000 votes so far. Janice McGeachin at 22%. That's Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin at 22%, getting a little more than 11,000 votes. And Ed Humphreys in the third place position with 10% of the votes at about 5,200. So again, that's one of the big races that we watch throughout the rest of the evening.
Yeah, that's a sizable lead that,
it is a sizable
that
lead.
the governor has, but we'll see. I think that my guess is that there are a number of other candidates on the Republican ballot, right? Other than the lieutenant governor. And I think that voters for Humphrey or Bradshaw or any of these others are probably drawing away from McGeachin, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, so so that might help the sitting governor do better in the end, because the far right votes might get frittered away on a number of candidates as opposed to only going to McGeachin.
That's right. We're going to wrap it up here at KTVB.com. We'll see you in a bit at KTVB Channel 7. races that we are keeping close tabs on tonight. That would be the race for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, superintendent of public instruction, and attorney general. And we have team coverage to bring it all to you tonight. We have chief political reporter Joe Paris. He is here, and he's going to break down the election results as they get into the studio and into KTVB. Doug Petcash, Morgan Romero, they are with the Republicans, who are hosting their election night celebration at the Hilton Garden Inn. That's the hotel in downtown Boise. You can see Tristan Lewis on your screen there at Canyon County Elections Office in Caldwell, and Andrew Barline at the Ada County Elections Office in Boise. We're also joined by political analyst Dr. Stephanie Witt. She is here in studio with us, as she always is and has been for the last several elections. Thank you and welcome again for joining us and helping us kind of decipher what will be happening for the rest of this evening. But we're going to get right to it. We're going to go right out to live where Doug and Morgan are standing by at GOP headquarters. Doug, Morgan?
Yeah, Brian, the room has really filled up as the candidates have begun to speak and address the crowd. It's packed in here at the Hilton Garden Inn. Right now, Senator Mike Crapo is addressing the crowd by video conferencing, and Representative Russ Fulcher, who is running unopposed in the primary, just finished up doing his address by video conferencing as well.
Yeah, but we have seen several candidates here in person. We just spoke with Debbie Critchfield, who's running for superintendent of public instruction against incumbent Sherry Ibarra, as well as former Democratic Senator Brandon Durst, state senator that is. We've also seen former Congressman Raul Labrador here, who's running for attorney general against incumbent Lawrence Wasden and Art Macomer. We've seen a lot of other candidates kind of going upstairs as they have suites at this hotel, and they're going to be trickling in throughout the rest of the evening.
That's right. Governor Brad Little has a room just across the across the parking lot here near the hotel. And we've also spoken with Idaho GOP Chairman Tom Luna. He'll be joining us in a little bit as well to talk about the state of the party and how this whole election is going.
Yeah, you know, he said earlier when we talked to him during our digital hour that this was such an interesting primary election because so many races were contested, and they haven't had such hotly contested races in several years here in the Republican Party in the state of Idaho. So they're keeping their eyes on it. He said, you know, when we asked him about how fractured and fissured the party was, kind of going in different directions, how do you unite the party after this? You know, when we wake up tomorrow with our projected winners, what do you do to move forward? And he said, you know, Republicans agree on 80% of issues. It's the rest of the 20% that you got to work on.
It's
right?
interesting that he used that percentage because I asked Speaker of the House Scott Bedke about that, who's running for lieutenant governor, about the rift, and he said the same thing. They agree on 80%. Well, we'll see how the percentages start to stack up in terms of the vote as we watch through the evening. Joe's going to be following that. For now, let's send it back to Brian in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Doug and Morgan. And I guess we're getting some results, or at least some projections from AP right now. Is that correct? And they are projecting that Senator Mike Crapo is the projected winner as for that U.S. Senate seat, at least on the, excuse me, not the seat, but the primary spot for the Republican ticket. Senator Mike Crapo has been in office since 1999, representing the great state of Idaho, the senior senator from Idaho, Mike Crapo. He's looking at 69% so far. Again, excuse me, only 12% reporting, but the AP projecting Senator Mike Crapo, the incumbent, winning that spot. No surprises there for you, I'm sure.
No surprise.
All right.
Not at all.
Not at all. All right, well, let's go out to see what Tristan Lewis is looking like out in Canyon County. Tristan, there's been an interesting watch for you this afternoon with some long lines that we've seen in the Canyon County area that we really haven't seen in even in Ada County, where, well, it's the state's most populated county.
Yeah, Brian, I'll get to the long lines in just a second. Results are coming in slowly but surely. Right now, all we have reporting so far at the Canyon County Elections Office is just the early voting. Just on this unofficial ballot, it says about 3,400 people did some early voting. So it's still too tough to call just kind of what some of these outcomes will be, because today, more than 20,600 people actually came out to those polling places in Canyon County to cast their vote. We were talking about some long lines. Yeah, we were out at Middleton Middle School where lines wrapped around the gym. Took people like 45, 50 minutes just to go up to the polling places. Behind me right now, you can see people doing some last-minute absentee ballot counting right now. Talking about those busy days. It was kind of a different thing for Canyon County. This year they did some new legislative districts, so people were living in new precincts and so had less polling places. That's why the longer lines. And they also had a lot longer of a Republican ballot too. That's what Canyon County Elections Office says is why some of those those long lines were going. Like I said, we got more than 20,000 people coming out to the polls just today alone. So might be a long night here in Canyon County Elections Office. Brian.
All right, and we'll check back in with you in just a moment. Tristan, Dr. Witt, we talked earlier about 27% voter turnout in Canyon County was the number that was mentioned earlier this evening, which, as you said, not a shocker. I mean, it's a pretty good, right kind of where they were expecting with that.
Right. I think some of the estimates have been that we might see upwards of about 33%, and so we're a little under that, but around 30% is what I would have expected for turnout statewide.
Okay, let's get an update on some of the numbers here, especially for the race for governor. These are the latest numbers, 13% reporting. We've got Governor Brad Little, the incumbent, at 65% with nearly a little more than 38,000 votes. Janice McGean, Lieutenant Governor, 22% of the votes so far with 13% reporting. That would be about 13,250 votes. And Ed Humphreys at 10% with just under 6,000 votes. And again, these are not the entire race, or I should say not the entire ticket on the Republican side. A lot more, but those are the top three with some of those numbers coming in for this evening. These numbers, as you said a little bit ago, that's a pretty not insurmountable, but that's a pretty big lead for incumbent Brad Little.
Yes, and you would expect that, right? I mean, the incumbent has the name recognition, and you know, it's unusual to be challenged by the lieutenant governor from the same party. So he's got twice the amount of money that the lieutenant governor has in terms of donations. So I'm not terribly surprised at that extensive lead.
And this is a unique situation, as you just touched on, where the sitting governor is facing a challenge from somebody from his own party in the second position, lieutenant governor. Yeah. Not a lot of that happening across this country right now. Well,
my understanding is that there's only been one other time since 1932 in Idaho that this happened, but I've been here 32 years. I've never seen it. It is definitely a sign of a healthy amount of contention within the Republican Party about what direction are we going to go, who is the right leader for that, and to have a sitting lieutenant governor run against the sitting governor, it is unusual.
Healthy amount is a good way to put that, Dr.
Yes.
Witt. Thank you very much. All right, I understand that we're going to go check in now with Andrew Bartline, who is keeping tabs on what's happening in Ada County. That would be the state's largest, inside the elections office there with an update on, well, how this processing of these votes is taking place. Andrew?
Yeah, well, Brian, while you're waiting for the results of these ballots, I'm watching in real time how they're getting processed. So I'll step out of the way here, and John Mark, our photojournalist, can step in. I mean, back there, that's what they're doing. They're getting these ballots from the precincts, and they're processing them and tabulating them. Now, we've been told that early voting and all absentee ballots have all been counted so far in Ada County. And if we step outside, we can see now where these ballots are coming in for today with all those absentee and mail-in ballots already being counted. So there's going to be a string of cars out here. Might take a moment for our camera to adjust, but there's going to be long lines going in both directions. Now, the cars that we're walking toward right now, these are the chief judges from the precincts. So a chief judge is the person who's running that precinct. They're in charge of it. If you went to the polls and voted, they probably told you what you're supposed to be doing there. So they got all the ballots. They're bringing them here so they can be counted. Look at this line going in both directions. This line is going out of the parking lot onto Benjamin. Now, if we come up this way, there's a Jeep that is just actually turning the corner and getting processed, which is perfect for me because at 9:28, I checked to make sure when that car came in the lot. I think it's been exactly 40 minutes since that car went through. Strange coincidence, Trent Triple, who is the chief deputy clerk here in Ada County, he told us it takes about 40 minutes for these cars to go through and get processed. So with 50 precincts coming through, already getting processed, there's 147 to go. That's what these cars are doing, bringing in these ballots, and they're getting tabulated. It's going to take some time, Brian.
Well, he seemed to nail that estimation of 40 minutes, so very good job for him. That's pretty good, pretty good determining factor. I want to remind you, too, you can keep up to date with all the numbers that'll be on the bottom of your screen throughout the evening here. KTVB.com is a good place to check some of the latest numbers, getting updates on those right now. And speaking of that, I believe we do have an update on the Attorney General's race for the Republican side of the ticket. This will be incumbent Lawrence Wasden facing a challenge from Raul Labrador, former Congressman Raul Labrador. And it looks like it's breaking down about 51% to 40%. McCumber is about 8% right now. Dr. Witt, is this something that isn't surprising, or is this something that you were kind of like, I didn't see it going that way this early?
Well, I expect this to be one of the closer races tonight that we'll see statewide. And again, I think this is one of those cases where a vote for McNamara is probably a vote that's taken away from Raul Labrador, if you think of it that way.
Okay.
That they're both competing for that further right portion of the party. And so having McNamara in the race could draw some votes away from Labrador and make it easier for Wasden to hang on. So Wasden is, of course, the incumbent, and that should give some advantage.
We've seen this kind of in-party income, like getting a challenge. I mean, why was this kind of the way when it comes to Attorney General, which is kind of, they usually play a lot of role just kind of in the background. We don't hear from them a lot.
Well, I think the candidates represent a really different philosophy about what that office should do and be, right? Wasden represents the more traditional approach that he looks at the issue, constitutional, yes, no, advises the governor, the agencies, and the legislature that way. The other two are talking about using that office to make more bully pulpit points, right? To file more lawsuits towards the federal government, or to make broader statements about policy issues and to be out in front that way. And I think Wasden's take on the office is that it's a more constrained role. He's there to advise. The other two are if you look at the attack ads, they're going after him. Why aren't you filing these suits to challenge the federal government? Why aren't you out in front on these things? So they represent a really different philosophy about what should the Attorney General be doing.
It's certainly a tale of two different tacks when it comes to what that Attorney General should be doing and how they do their job. All right, we're going to get over to Joe Paris. Now we're going to bring in Chief Political Reporter Joe Paris, who's over at the big board giving us some latest numbers, or keeping tabs on some of these latest numbers. And you've got them from pretty much, well, all over the state, Joe.
Yes, and let's take a look at some of these statewide races. And this is actually with about 13% reporting, so it's not everything, but this is a good chunk. And we just talked about the governor's race. Again, we'll highlight this. Governor Little extending his lead over Janice McGeehan, really by about 25,000 votes. We do see Ed Humphreys getting a little more votes as the night will go on. So we'll keep an eye on that. But for the lieutenant governor race, we see House Speaker Scott Bedke also starting to pull away from lieutenant governor candidate Priscilla Giddings. She is a state lawmaker. A short time ago, they were a little bit closer, but we see now that Scott Bedke is starting to extend the lead, and you'll see in the percentage-wise, he's starting to double. He's starting to double up, and we're starting to see that margin get wider and wider, and it begs a question as the night goes on in races like this: how long will they be able to really extend the lead without being able to cut into it? And at what point does it look like the Giddings campaign could not make that amount up? So it'll be wait and watch there. Over on the Secretary of State race, let's take a look over here. Phil Mcgrain, also similar story. He's extending his lead over State Representative Dorothy Moon. We're seeing here percentage-wise and vote-wise, Mcgrain out by about, I don't know, let's do some quick math, 13,000 votes there so far. But Brian, again, these are preliminary results, only about 13% reporting right now, but an early lead for some very familiar names.
All right, and we're going to keep tabs on these numbers for the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to bring you these coverage at least until 11 o'clock, maybe a little longer, depending on how these numbers do come in. We appreciate you joining us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more election coverage coming up right after this. Stay with us. And welcome back to our coverage of the 2022 Idaho primary election. We're going to go out to GOP headquarters because Doug Petcash is standing by with the chairman of the, of Idaho's GOP. Doug?
Yeah, that's right, Brian. I'm here with Idaho GOP Chairman Tom Luna. Sir, first of all, just returns are so early right now, but from what you're seeing, any surprises?
There's some close races and a couple that aren't close right now. The superintendent of public instruction race I thought would be closer, but we're still, still very, very early. I know from past experience how these things can swing when we realize where the votes are coming from. So that's what we're looking at right now, is where are these votes coming from, and if they're coming from a certain county, what percentage of that county is it actually the amount of vote. But right now you're starting to see some trends, and oftentimes those trends seem to hold out throughout the night, but we'll just have to wait for a little bit more of the votes to come in.
Yeah, 'cause it seems like we're at about 4 to 6%, I think, only so far. So that's probably still mostly absentee and early ballot.
A lot of absentee, some early voting. But I've seen some where it's up to 13% in some of the counties. But still, we need considerably more than that before you're going to see, a trend that you can have any confidence is going to stick. But there's going to be a number of close races, and it looks like the superintendent of public instruction race, the attorney general race, and maybe the secretary of state's race, are still races that are tight, and I think will continue to be.
Certainly ones we're closely watching.
Yeah. And then we have a number of local races. Now I know, here in the Treasure Valley, but if you go across the state, you see a number of incumbents that are in very close races also for legislative seats.
After the redistricting, too, there's going to be a big shift in the State House.
Yes.
We do have to talk about the split in the Republican Party again. It's pretty evident right now. After tonight, no matter who wins, and I know that the Central Committee stays neutral in these races, how do you move forward and unite?
My goal has been that, and my experience has been, is that if people feel like they've been heard and treated fairly, that even if the result of a decision doesn't go the way they would have hoped, that they stay involved and they want to make things better. But if people feel like they haven't been heard or they haven't been treated fairly, they're never going to support the final outcome. So I'm hoping we've been successful in every candidate, every campaign, believing and feeling they've been treated fairly and they've been heard. And then the voters decide. I think we've accomplished that, and with that momentum then we will focus on tomorrow. Our victory rally is at noon on the steps of the Capitol, and from there we'll move forward.
Well, that was my next question. It's the Unity Rally. It's kind of a tradition the day after the election. Do you expect the losers, whoever they are, to show up?
I mean, we've had experiences in the past where most have and some haven't, but you just have to see. I've been on both sides of this. It's not easy to go to that rally when you didn't win, even if you're not upset, right?
You're talking about when you ran.
Yeah, when I ran and lost, right? It's not easy to go, right? But I went, and if I had any hesitation, it wasn't because of my feelings about my opponents or other candidates. It's just you've worked so hard, the adrenaline is gone, and you're done. I mean, you're just out of it, and then you stand there and you humbly accept the will of the people.
Yeah. Chairman Luna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you throughout the night.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Send it back to Brian in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Doug. And of course, joining us as usual is Dr. Stephanie Witt, Boise State political science professor, to kind of break this down. And we have an updated number, I think, when it comes to the governor's race on the Republican side of the ticket. Brad Little now leading 62%, the incumbent, with 51,224 votes, with 25% reporting. Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin running for governor, 20,000 votes, a little more than 20,000 votes, with about 24% of those votes going toward her. Edward Humphreys getting a little bit of a boost, went from 10% to 11% with just under 9,000 votes now. And again, 30,000 vote, almost 31,000 vote lead for Governor Brad Little, the incumbent there. It seems to be widening a little bit.
Yeah, the lead is lengthening. It's still very early, and I guess it's possible that there are pockets of the state that have not reported their numbers yet, where he may not be in the lead, and it could get a little tighter. But it looks like he's off to a pretty good lead right now. I would be surprised if this gets super close.
Okay, so Lieutenant Governor hoping for that spot in the governor's seat, but what about the spot that she leaves behind, her position as Lieutenant Governor? We have an update on those numbers. That's the race with Speaker of the House Scott Bedke. We've got Representative Priscilla Giddings also in that race. These are the latest numbers from them. And you can see 62% right now for the current Speaker of the House Scott Bedke. About 41,000 votes, a little shy of 42,000 votes there. 21,000, 32% of the votes cast, 19% reporting for Representative Giddings.
Again, the same caveat that I don't know which parts of the state those numbers are from, right? So Representative Giddings is, of course, from the Cottonwood area.
Yep, North Idaho.
And so, you know, those counties from that area, maybe we don't have those numbers yet. I'm not sure which counties have reported. So, you know, you have to put that grain of salt there that it could change as those counties come in.
This is an interesting tidbit here, just being told AP is now calling this race for governor. The Republican ticket for Brad Little, the incumbent, 62%. Again, just projected winner now reporting 27%. AP is saying Brad Little is going to win this race here at 62% of the vote. And we're only, what, 2.5 hours into counting these ballots.
Well, I'm maybe a little more cautious than the AP, but
yeah.
I'm sure they have a good methodology there.
And I think a lot of people, as you mentioned, some of these votes may be being split, but there was also a lot of pushback on the way Lieutenant Governor was kind of handling her business going into this election when it comes to, well, both in the candidacy and as Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, I think she started out with a hard focus on Little's pandemic response. But as we get months and months away from the last real restrictions that were in place, it's harder to make your point when the economy is going so as well as it is. You know, that Idaho is booming. We've had such a surplus in tax receipts that they're sending back rebates to voters. I mean, the governor gets to claim a lot of credit for being around while that's happening, right? So, so I think that, you know, the pandemic isn't top of line for people as much anymore, and so maybe that took the issue away. She did have some high-profile instances. He would leave the state. She would issue an executive order. He would come back and nullify it. And, you know, so that caused a lot of publicity for her. But probably,
showing up at a white nationalist conference as well, sending a video to that conference, I should say.
Yes, and she seems to have some affiliations that overlap with those kinds of organizations. And mismanaging a relatively small state budget, you know, where she needed to ask for additional money, which was refused, by the way.
It was.
So a lot of things got her in the spotlight.
Okay, and again, AP is calling that race right now for incumbent Brad Little for the governor position. That's 62% of the votes. And again, only 27% reporting. We're going to keep an update on this. But while we do that, you can keep up to date with numbers at KTVB.com. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to our coverage of Decision 2022. We're watching what's happening with the primary election across the state in Idaho. And as we talked about before the break, I'm joined again by Boise State professor, political science professor, Dr. Stephanie Witt. We talked about this before the break. Associated Press is already calling this governor's race on the Republican side for incumbent Governor Brad Little. 62% reporting, or 62%, excuse me, of the vote, of the 27% reporting, with 24% going to Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin, 11% going to Edward Humphreys. It seemed early. We've been talking about, even through the break, we're like, already, we're only at 27%. The AP has made this call. It is a shock. Maybe shock's a strong word.
I'm a little surprised that with only this percentage reporting that they're calling it, but we were also discussing that neither of us know what the math is that they do to make that determination.
Right.
So I assume there's somebody in a room figuring out how many votes remain and you know what the odds are that she could make up that difference. I'm not surprised that he's going to win. I'm a little surprised at how early they're calling this, though.
And I think we're getting word now that we're going to hear from Governor Little coming up in about 15 minutes, I think, at GOP headquarters. I believe that's kind of the latest update. We'll let you know if that changes, but within 15 minutes, we could see some sort of, well, I guess, acceptance speech from the governor coming up. Say it again. So the thing we're going to do now is go over to Joe here, who's got some of those numbers. We were just talking about that, Joe, a little bit. That green right there by the governor, but you have some other numbers that you kind of wanted to share with us?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that the governor's race has been called this early, and it'll be interesting to see if any of the governor's opponents draw, you know, what they would say a red flag about this. As we watch through the night, we'll still be tracking the results. Just because you see the green check mark there doesn't mean that the votes aren't still being tallied and added. So these numbers you see on the screen, they will be changing throughout the night. A few other statewide races we're keeping an eye on it for you, I should say. Lieutenant Governor for the GOP side, Scott Bedke and Priscilla Giddings. We've seen Scott Bedke take a little bit of a lead here over the last 30 minutes, and as the night goes on, we see Scott Bedke, who's the current House Speaker, basically double up on his political rival, State Representative Priscilla Giddings. You could see here, both percentage-wise and vote-wise, we're starting to see about a 2-to-1 ratio for Scott Bedke, so it'll be interesting to see if he holds that. Over on the Secretary of State's race, we're also seeing a similar, I guess, trend here with Ada County Clerk Phil Mcgrain starting to extend his lead over State Representative Dorothy Moon in this race here. Again, we've got, let's do some simple math here, Joe. We got about 15,000 vote lead for Mcgrain there. Again, that's only 23% reporting, but we're starting to see some trends, Brian, of who likely could win these races.
And we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern here as well.
We are.
We'll get into that a little bit longer. I want to also point out that 15-minute speech possibly that we're going to see from Governor Little might be a little sooner. This is why we're going to kind of check in right now with Doug and Morgan at GOP headquarters. He's standing by there with former Congressman Raul Labrador. Morgan.
Yeah, hey, Brian and Joe. As Joe just talked about, AP is projecting that Governor Brad Little did win the gubernatorial race. The energy really electric here right now. A lot of people buzzing about. Little's campaign says it could be about 5 minutes until he comes to this room and gives a speech, and then will perhaps talk to us afterwards. But as you said, I'm here with former Congressman Raul Labrador, who's running for Attorney General against incumbent Lawrence Wasden, as well as an attorney named Art Macomer. Former Congressman, how is tonight different than it has been in the past when you've run for Congress, when you've run for positions in the state, when you ran for governor?
It's always the same. You get really nervous until about 10 o'clock at night because you don't know what's happening. You know, the early results are always bad for me just because Ada County, the Boise area is not the strongest area for me. The rest of the state is super strong for me. So as you're seeing tonight, you know, we started down by 11 points and now it's getting closer and closer. And I think by the end of the night, we're going to be pretty good.
It's interesting that you have experience with that because you've run before. You're able to say this is what, you know, as the percentages, the precincts report, this is what it looks like for you.
Absolutely, yeah. When I first ran for the legislature, it's a funny story. The early voting was completely against me. I was in third place. And I thought, oh, wow, this is terrible. And I didn't know as much about early voting and all those things. And by the end of the night, I was the overwhelming vote getter. So I always wait till about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and that's when you can tell really what's happening.
Even if they project the winner prior?
Well, no. I mean, if they project the winner, they're looking at the whole state. Mm-hmm. But in our race, I don't think they're going to do that for a while.
why are you running for this job? You are an attorney. You've been an attorney for decades. Why are you running for Attorney General of the state of Idaho?
You know, I watched what happened in the state of Idaho for the last 10 years, and especially the last 2 years, as we saw that the government was shutting down businesses, churches, and schools, and forcing people to mask up. And I just thought, you know, that's not the Idaho that I believe in. That's not the Idaho that I love. Usually we let people make decisions for themselves. And I think that's what we should have done. And I realized that it was the Attorney General who was behind all those decisions, who was giving, in my opinion, the wrong legal advice to the governor, telling him that he could shut down certain things, and most importantly, telling him that he could have an emergency order in the state of Idaho for longer than 60 days. And that just was not right for the people of Idaho, and that's why I decided to run for Attorney General.
Do you think you'll be a vastly different candidate than, or Attorney General, should you win? Do you think you'd be vastly different than your opponents?
Oh, very different. I'm going to be much more aggressive. I'm going to be much more conservative. I also have a better relationship with the legislature. You know, for the last 20 years, this Attorney General has had some run-ins with the state legislature, and I'll be able to work with the Attorney General, with the legislature a little bit better than he has been able to work.
And of course, it's an important separation of powers between
Correct.
the legislature, the executive branch, and the Attorney General. I mean, those are very different offices.
Very different offices, and I think what gives me a heads up or a leg up is that I was a state legislator and I was a federal legislator, and I understand the role of the state legislature. Maybe I have a little bit more reverence than he does for the state legislature. I think they're super important people that are representing the people of their districts. I don't need to condescend or talk down to them. I just need to work with them and try to convince them that the legal opinions that I'm giving and I'm working with him are the best legal opinions for the state. He got into too many little fights with the legislature, and as you saw, they tried to take away his funding, they tried to take away his responsibilities, and I hope to bring just a better relationship to that executive legislative relationship.
Right. Okay, Congressman Labrador, we are going to have to let you go because I think Governor Little is taking the stage right now, but we will check in with you as results trickle in. And I know he's here hanging out with his family and with his campaign. You'll be in and out of the room, so I'd love to catch up with you later. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I'll talk to you soon. Okay, we'll send it back to you guys while we figure out what Governor Little is going to do next, guys.
All right, Morgan, yeah, it looks like the other video feed that we're getting there, Governor Little is in the room with his wife Teresa there and getting congratulated by some of the people there at the GOP party, and you can see he's saying hello and to a lot of people there. But yes, waiting for him to make his way to the stage. It looks like a pretty festive event so far. Things kind of picked up a little bit. I was going to ask Morgan as we kind of went to her a little bit what the mood was, but she kind of explained it. She got a little bit of there was a little bit of a swell, she says, when this announcement came from the AP.
Yes, well, we already know that the Mcgrain campaign is not there, right? They're at another location, so they're probably happy to see, the official green check there that Brad Little has won. And I'm sure he would like to get this over with earlier rather than later in terms of come in, make a speech, and then leave the ballroom. I understand they have their own suites there, so it'd be a good time to get that over with.
And it is still early. I mean, he's obviously not in any hurry to make his way to the stage right now. It's only 10:35, and as you know, we're going to kind of take this election coverage to the 11 o'clock hour and see how it plays out here. But so we're going to be going a little bit longer than our normal 10 o'clock newscast. But yes, we are waiting for incumbent Governor Brad Little to take the stage and make a speech, an acceptance speech at some point here. And I told in the next few minutes, looks like he's making his way there now. Possibly, we'll see what happens. There we lost him a little bit.
There he's going up
Chairman Tom Luna there standing on the stage.
This is the family with him.
Bringing the family up there, and I'm probably going to wait for an announcement here, so we're going to go there live here in just a second when I believe GOP Chairman Tom Luna will take to the podium to announce Governor Brad Little to the stage to make that speech. 60, looking at the latest numbers, I said it was 62%, now 61%. So there's been a slight change. 61, a little bit of a drop. Again, still called by the AP, the Associated Press, still making this call. But as Joe mentioned, still a lot of time left, a lot of votes left to be counted. But AP, according to them, they don't see much change. They still project him as the winner at 61% right now, with Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan at 25%. Now let's listen into what Chairman of the GOP, Tom Luna, has to say from the podium.
The Associated Press and numerous news outlets have called the governor's race for the great state of Idaho. I want to introduce to you this current governor of Idaho and the soon-to-be re-elected governor of Idaho, the 33rd governor of the great state of Idaho, Brad Little. Come on, you guys.
It's already a long night. It's going to be a little longer until I get my family up here, so. Well, Chairman Luna, thank you. And I want to thank all the Republican candidates who ran in this primary. All of you, collectively, your hard work and the passion for keeping Idaho red. I'm truly humbled by the Idaho Republican Party and how they've entrusted me to continue to be your governor. Just like nearly every day in the last 3.5 years, I felt the honor of serving the great state of Idaho in good times and in tough times. And once again, I'm humbled by the awesome opportunity to serve and work for the great people of Idaho. I must thank the people without whom I could not have done this, especially Teresa and my family. My team, our great team of supporters, and all my legislative partners. The contrast between the conservative approach to governing, which Idaho has embraced for years, and the leftist view is unmistakable. The Democrats and Biden have shown this flawed handling of everything, from the disaster on our border to his heavy-handed approach to COVID. Idahoans and Americans across the country are paying more from everything, from fuel to food to the necessities of life. The leftist states are dysfunctional places with broken policies that limit opportunity. We're seeing a mass exodus of businesses and families from blue states seeking our freedom and better opportunities in our red states. And while we would still like to build a wall around Idaho and make California pay for it, I can't say I blame anyone for wanting to be right here in Idaho. Here in Idaho, we're lowering taxes, getting people to work, securing a strong future for our people. Our conservative approach to governing shows in our unwavering commitment to standing up for Idahoans that care about backing the blue, empowering parents, fighting against federal overreach, protecting pre-born lives, and defending the Second Amendment. We've championed tax cuts for families and businesses, giving back $1 billion in the past 3 years. And yes, there's more to come. We in Idaho spend way less than we bring in and position ourselves for the good times to withstand the hard times. No other state has performed like Idaho. We've led the nation in job recovery and income growth. Idaho has added thousands of businesses in the past 2+ years. Our people are working, and we consistently rank as the top state for the best employment. We demonstrate foresight by making investments in schools, roads, water, and other areas that directly impact the quality of life and help keep up with our growth. Thank you, Republican Idaho, for making it all possible. We all feel it. The stakes are higher now than ever before. I know that the outcome of any election will leave some feeling dissatisfied because their choice candidate may not have succeeded. But we need to keep our eye on the prize. on the bigger picture to make sure the Republican ideals of capitalism, limited government, family, freedom continue to dominate for many years to come. The rest of the country is watching. I'm reminded of the famous words of one of my heroes, President Ronald Reagan. He stated, quote, "The Republican Party in this state nationally is a broad party where there is room in our tent for many views. Indeed, the divergence of views is one of our strengths." His words were true then and perhaps truer now. Idaho Republicans agree on about 90% of things. During the primary, it is a sliver of the issues that we disagree with that get all the attention. Like President Reagan, we need to view the disagreement as a strength and not something to overcome. It means our party is attracting a broad range of people. But now is the time to band together, to get back to focusing on what we agree as Republicans. The vast majority of the issues facing our families, our state, and our country. Onward and upward, they say. We are fortunate and truly blessed to live in this free country where anyone can run for office. We have an open process, and that's what our republic is all about. Therefore, we stand here to congratulate not only the winners tonight, but everyone who participated in the election. You all have my support, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Thank you again. God bless America, and God bless Idaho. Thank you.
And there you have Governor Little with his acceptance speech, taking home the, well, so far AP is projecting him as the winner for the Republican primary ticket, beating Janice McGeehan. I think the number's up around 25% now for McGeehan, 60%. So again, those numbers coming down. Joe, we were just talking about this while we were listening to his speech. There's still a lot of votes out there to be counted across the state of Idaho.
Oh, yeah.
AP's still projecting him, though, going with that 60%. We went from 62 now down to 60. One of the things you wanted to touch on, I want to ask both of you this. The strategy that Governor Little used during this primary season of just like, basically, I said what I said, and I'm not going to say anything else. Didn't participate in any debates.
Right.
Stuck to some ads on television and on the radio, but didn't get into a whole lot of back and forth with his competitors.
No, and you had a situation with the governor and lieutenant governor running against each other where we saw Lieutenant Governor McGeehan really push back on Governor Little and really, you know, show the voters and show the people of Idaho, these are the problems that a group of us have with the governor. Almost every opportunity that Governor Little had, including in interviews with myself, he was very diplomatic about his relationship and the situation with the lieutenant governor. He would give cheeky comments or read in between the line thoughts where you understood he was frustrated with certain things, but he stayed very diplomatic. Yes, he did have attack ads on television. That is very true. But aside from that, as Brian highlighted, did not participate in debates, was very quiet leading into the election, and there were two very different camps. Some said maybe he needs to get out there and do more. Maybe he should be worried. Others said the governor must be extremely confident in the race he's running, confident that he has the support of Idahoans, and he doesn't feel the need to get out there and talk about things like that.
Obviously well played from your point of view.
Yes, I think that refusing to debate gets rid of giving her a platform, right? It makes her a legitimate comparator to him, right? And if you don't engage in the debate, then you don't give her that place to look gubernatorial or on the same level as him. And I think it's a strategy we're seeing Republicans take across the country. And part of that is rooted in the mistrust of, you know, what they would call the mainstream media, right? That they don't trust the debates that are run by traditional media outlets. So there's part of a larger strategy happening nationwide. And then I think here, it's like he's the governor. He doesn't give her the same footing in the debate. It was a good strategy.
All right, I know there's a whole lot of other races we're keeping tabs on, but we got to take a break really quickly. We'll be back to talk a little bit more about all those other races that we're watching and see if this changes at all. So stay with us. We'll be right back with more coverage of Decision 2022 right after this. All right, welcome back to Decision 2022. I'm joined by BSU political science professor Dr. Stephanie Witt, Joe Paris, chief political reporter here for KTVB, and we're going to talk a little bit about the governor's race. The Republican side already called by the AP with incumbent Governor Brad Little taking that with a little more than 60% of the votes so far. But the Democratic side of the ticket, Joe, you want to kind of touch a little bit on.
Yeah, and I know if you're sitting at home tonight, you may wonder, well, why are you not talking about the Democrat races? And that's because it is a primary election, you may remember. The winners of these elections go on to the November general ballot. And to be frank with you, the Democrats had a lot of uncontested races. So there's nothing to report in the sense that there was no challenger. Tomorrow, as we have all the results come in, we'll start showing you what your November ballot will look like. But with the projected winner of Governor Brad Little, who is he projected to face on the Democrat side? Right now, I can tell you, according to the Secretary of State's office, Stephen Haidt has about 78% of the vote, and Stephen Haidt was the only Democrat listed on the ballot. Sandpoint Mayor Shelby Wrongstad is running an aggressive write-in campaign. We will not know the exact results of that for several days or several weeks because he's had a write-in campaign, which you can go read about another time. It's hard for the process to verify all the signatures and make sure who they're voting for.
It could be a week till we hear.
It could be a week. It could be longer. I can tell you this, though. While the Secretary of State's office doesn't report the exact number of write-ins, they can tell us how many write-ins in general they were. So that'll include Shelby Wrongstad and other people that are written in by Democrats. I can tell you, though, even if Shelby Wrongstad got all of the write-in votes, that only accounts for 21% of the votes right now. All of this could change very quickly as we watch in elections, but if it were to end right now, it would appear that Stephen Haidt would be on the ballot going against Governor Little. Now, earlier tonight, we did check in with the Idaho Democrats. They had an event down at Clairvoyant Brewing. We spoke with Idaho Democrats Party Chair Lauren Necochea about the night. Here's what she had to say looking forward.
We do have a couple of contested races, and we're excited to see who prevails in those races. We know whichever candidate prevails on our side, they'll be dedicated to solutions that will help Idaho's working families. We're also excited to see who our opponents are going to be on the other side.
So tomorrow morning is really when we're going to start to get a lay of the land of what all the ballots are going to look like in November. Again, the one holdup will be that governor Democratic primary with the write-in. So we'll report back as soon as that info is available.
And there are, of course, other races going on right now, some of these statewide races, congressional races, by the way. I want to see if Dr. Witt can give us an update on what's happening with Congressman. We'll get to those in just a second, but with with Representative Mike Simpson.
Yes.
Congressman Mike Simpson.
Comfortable lead. He currently has about 59% of the votes that have come in. This is a rematch with Brian Smith, and Brian Smith currently has about almost 30% of the votes in that race. So I would expect Simpson to win. He's the incumbent. He's well known.
He is well known, 58% there, as you see, 30%. AP has already called the race for Senator Mike Crapo as well. Congressman Russ Fulcher ran unopposed on the Republican side. So that kind of is an uncontested thing as well. But we do have some AG numbers. Is that what you're saying? We can get to some of the latest numbers there. When it comes to Attorney General, we were talking about this as well because this one is a very tight race right now. Raul Labrador, Congressman Raul Labrador out ahead with 46% of the votes. Lawrence Wasden, the incumbent, at 45% of the votes. 35% of the districts reporting right now, and you can see it's about a 205 vote split between the top two candidates. McNamara at 9% with just under 10,000 votes. So this one's going to go down to the wire. It seems right now.
It is. And earlier, we saw the report of all the precinct captains in the line of cars at Ada County, right? So that means that most of the Ada County votes are probably not represented here yet.
This is video you're seeing right now on your screen of those votes being brought into the Ada County Elections Office this is a live video, by the way, how they will be processed, as you mentioned. So a lot of votes still left.
Well, most of the people in the state live right here, so you do need to kind of wait for that to happen. The other thing I'd point out is if you added Macomber and Labrador's votes together, they would beat Wasden.
And they are doing that right now, as you can see, but Labrador on his own is winning this race so far. Again, another one we're going to keep tabs on. Do we have any other results? It's looking at some of those other, let me step over here and grab this here, some of the other totals that we're looking at when it comes to, for example, Lieutenant Governor.
Right. I think that in this case, the Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke, has a comfortable lead over Representative Giddings, and I expect that to hold. It may become a little more competitive, but he's got almost double the number of her votes.
The difference between this one here was 60% of the votes going for Scott Bedke, Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
34% going for Priscilla Giddings. The difference between calling this one and, say, the governor's race, whereas the Lieutenant Governor McGeehan had 25% of the votes. So there's a wider margin there, but even with that 60% going towards Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke right now.
Again, the thing I don't know is what part of the state are these votes from that we have compiled so far, right? So if the say a lot of votes, precincts and counties from the Panhandle come in now, that we may see Giddings kind of get a little closer because she is from that area and she may have a lot of voters there. So that we could see some movement there. I think the really close race is going to be the Attorney General and the Superintendent of Public Instruction race, which, in which the three are grouped more closely.
Right, and I want to get over to Joe if we can right now. Joe, with that Superintendent of Public Instruction race, do you have an update on some of those numbers? Hold on 1 second, Joe, before we get to that. I hear that we have Governor Brad Little down at GOP headquarters standing by with Doug and Morgan. We'll send it over to you guys right now.
That's right, Brian. We are standing here with the projected winner of the Republican primary. Of course, these results aren't official, Governor, but, well, how are you feeling right now?
I feel great.
And then anything surprise you that it was called pretty early in the night?
No, I mean, we're really happy about it. We got results from one end of the state to the other, and the trend is great everywhere, and we're delighted. We're confident about all the projections that have come forward, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves, get to work. We'll have a big unity rally tomorrow, and I might take a day off.
Okay.
Governor, as those of you back at home that heard the speech, you talked about unification. You talked about the things that the Republican Party has in common more than they do not. 90% of people agree on things. Talk a little bit about that moving forward, how you're going to unify your party that really does disagree on quite a few things, quite a few issues.
I mean, primaries, particularly in a state that's predominantly Republican, are always about, this on this edge and this on the other. But, the concept of opportunity, limited government, giving people back money, investing in the necessities of life are common things. There's always a little something on the fringe here and something on the fringe there, and we want to hear from those people. We know it's important to them. What can we do to alleviate their concerns? But I think the voters tonight really spoke loudly about, my job is I got to get stuff done. And particularly these last 3.5 years, there were times when there was a lot of pressure on us, but the people of Idaho, my team, a lot of great people around the state of Idaho did a lot of work, and I think it's reflected in the margins that you're seeing in this election.
Governor, your opponents, in particular Lieutenant Governor McGeehan, really pushed about your decision to do this stay-at-home order, shut down businesses, and those types of things during the pandemic. Ultimately, what do you think separated the two of you in this vote?
Well, I mean, the numbers don't lie. We're the fastest recovering state of every state. Nobody did better post-pandemic than we did. And so what we did is obviously reflected in the attitudes of the people of Idaho, of the job growth, of the income growth, of our academic success. In essence, nobody wanted kids out of school. It was the local districts that decided to keep people out of schools to make sure everybody was safe. So, the model of letting local government make decisions and businesses make decisions, I think is reflected in the margins that we're seeing tonight.
Governor, what does it say about the future of the Republican Party in the state of Idaho? They had choices in this race. You and Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan, which very opposite ends of the Republican Party. You are conservative. She's conservative as well. What does it say about the future of the Republican Party and what Idahoans really want?
Well, I would almost argue that she and I agree on a lot of things, just like I said up there a little bit ago. But in a primary, you have to highlight the differences between the candidates, and that's what she tried to do and did. But I think the vote reflects what the people of Idaho think. But I fully understand. I mean, Janice and I agree on limited government, on giving money back to the taxpayers, on individual liberty, on free enterprise. But it was some of the things kind of on the edge that we disagreed about.
Yeah.
Well, Governor, of course, this isn't a done deal. You still have the general election to go through. Of course, Idaho is a vastly majority Republican state. What will you focus on heading towards the general election?
Well, of course, even during the primary, you know, I was obviously concerned about the election, but I got to do my job. I got to continue to govern the state of Idaho. You know, we got things, you know, we're getting ready to, in a drought, to look at a fire year. Yeah. We've got a lot of money that the legislature appropriated in a lot of areas. We need to make sure it's done right. I think the best policy is the best politics, and I'm going to continue to try and implement good policy for the state of Idaho.
What do you think would be different about what you've already done? What about those folks that didn't vote for you and are calling for change? What could you do differently to sort of address some of those questions and asks?
Well, I'm always willing to listen to people. A lot of it is about things that are almost 2 years ago. But as I said, if you look at, we're the fastest recovery state of all the states. Our education attainment is going up. We're making investments. Our teachers are deciding that they want to stay here because of the investments we made. I am very proud of all those things. I'm proud of the money we're putting into roads. Now I want everybody to be a little cautious. There's going to be some orange cones out there, and we're going to have to do some of these projects. But I'm very proud of what with a lot of the legislators that are in this room, what we got done. I got to implement them, and I hope those people will look at results rather than rhetoric.
Governor, I know a lot of people want to talk to you tonight. Congratulations, and of course we'll continue to follow this over the next 4 or 5 months as we get closer to the general election. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Governor.
Current governors, what the word I meant to say is there Governor Brad Little running for a third term, or second term.
He's been in
it's
office.
getting late in the night.
It is
second
getting late.
Terms,
second term.
And so it was good to have some time with him, and we'll send it back to the studio.
We should mention that was the earliest race that was called, projected by the Associated Press. We're watching, as Joe and Brian had talked about, watching the Attorney General race very closely. The other statewide races, Secretary of State, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Lieutenant Governor's race.
Yeah.
And what this effectively means is because Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin was running for governor, she is no longer Lieutenant Governor. So her seat is vacated. She gave that up. Priscilla Giddings vying for that. Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke, vying for that as well.
Of course, still has 6 months to serve in that seat until January. But interesting, all of the top leaders that we've spoken to here at the Idaho GOP party tonight, all of them, and we've asked every one of them about the rift in the Republican Party, and they all have their talking points apparently, because they all say, we agree on 80% at least, and then we'll figure out the rest.
Right, saying that they have more in common than not. We're going to check in with some other candidates, watch these results roll in, and try to get some reaction from them. But for now, we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Morgan and Doug. Of course, that Unity rally that's scheduled for tomorrow will give us a little bit more indication of how Unify.
We'll see who shows up.
We'll see who shows up, yes. And so we're kind of wrapping up our coverage here of Decision 2022. We kind of give you a recap. We do know that AP has called the race for Congressman Mike Simpson, the projected winner there with 57% of the votes over Brian Smith, his contender there with 22,000 votes and 31% of those votes, coming in with Congressman Simpson leading by nearly 20,000 votes so far. So not really a surprise there, as we kind of talked about as well. All right, so let's go through some of these other races really quickly, Joe, as we kind of get toward the end of our coverage tonight. Let's go again, the AP projecting Governor Brad Little winning the spot for the Republican primary ticket.
And I think we have some new numbers we're going to show you right now. This is for the Attorney General race. Now, if you were with us as we started about 9 to 9:30, the incumbent, Loris Wasden, had a little bit of a lead over Labrador. Throughout the night, Labrador was kind of playing behind Wasden, kind of playing catch up as more and more votes came in. Labrador has now gone ahead. Now, it's not by a huge margin. It's about a 2 22,000 vote difference. But at this point of the night, and especially that we're starting to see that a lot of the precincts reporting are in Ada County, meaning there's a lot of the population's vote that is already being counted. Some of these races, although close, could be coming closer to an end. They're not close to being called, but in terms of math, the math doesn't work out in the sense that there are candidates out there on these boards right now. There's just not enough votes for them to make up the margin.
That 1,500 vote margin, though, is a little bit extended when we saw that about 5 minutes ago when it was around 500. So it's extending a little bit there.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that this one will be called in the next few minutes.
No,
Yeah.
Not by any stretch.
Right.
That's a late one for sure.
Lieutenant Governor, Joe, give us the latest on that one.
On the lieutenant governor race, we're seeing something very similar to the governor's race. Scott Bedke had pulled out earlier in the night ahead of Priscilla Giddings at last check. Here you go right now. These are the live data. House Speaker Scott Bedke leads with 60% of the vote, and he's got a major lead. About, I don't know, what is that? Do some math with me, Brian. That is about 22,000 votes ahead of Priscilla Giddings. Again, at this point of the night, of course, it says reporting 27%. That means precincts reporting. Remember that some precincts are in different parts of the state, but a lot of them so far have been reported from Ada County, where we have a pretty heavy population set for the state of Idaho. So again, we're not close to calling these. That's not our job. We're just going to report the current numbers, but it does look like Bedke is pulling away for lieutenant governor.
And that's Priscilla Giddings, who lined up on the same side of the spectrum as Lieutenant Governor McGean. So it's kind of a, not necessarily a referendum, but we're seeing kind of where these votes are starting to land, other than the spot for Attorney General.
Well, and we've heard from a really, I guess, a segment of Republican voters over the last 2 years about their frustrations with the establishment or the mainstream Republican Party. And we'd seen, rallies, and we'd seen a lot of social media videos.
A lot of noise.
A lot of noise. And there was questions. Is this a vocal minority, or is this how the entire state of Idaho feels? And on some very specific issues that we don't have time to get into tonight, we will tomorrow on the 208, of course. It's interesting to see where the voters are voting. And again, think about who's voting in this election. It's a closed GOP primary that we're talking about for most of the night here. So you really just have the people that are interested in registering for a Republican, or people that are so politically adept to the process that if they're Republican or not, they want to be part of what essentially is the general election in Idaho with such a heavy vote base of Republicans here in May. We do also have some other statewide races we want to talk to you about before we go off the air tonight. Superintendent of Public Instruction, a great debate you saw here on KTVB. Debbie Critchfield is sneaking away there from incumbent Sherry Ibarra. Brandon Durst there in third place. Again, it's about an 11,000 vote difference between Critchfield and Ibarra. I've been tracking that throughout the night. Critchfield is very slowly creating a bigger gap in between the two of them. So again, only 27% reporting. We are going to keep an eye on that overnight. But it does look like a lot of these, I guess if you want to call them establishment or traditional GOP candidates, they do look like they will go on to win tonight, which again is an interesting commentary on Idaho voters.
Dr. Witt, I want to ask you about Secretary of State. Right now we're looking at numbers with Phil Mcgrain at 52%. You talked about combining these two between Mary Souza and Dorothy Moon, Representative Dorothy Moon, Senator Mary Souza. Even if you combine those two, though, right now, it still looks like Phil Mcgrain is well ahead.
That's correct. I think that Representative Moon, Senator Souza, a similar choice, similar complaints about the system, similar belief that Trump won in 2020. So I think Mcgrain is sort of the other choice. They're splitting the vote between the people that.
Does it put to bed this notion of election integrity here in the state of Idaho?
Well, I don't know. The Republican Party issued a statement yesterday that they believe strongly in the integrity of the elections in Idaho. Perhaps the vote for Mcgrain is a signal that the voters believe that the elections are held with integrity.
Yep. That's so far. And Phil Mcgrain is Ada County Clerk, has done a lot of those elections so far and leading that race there. I believe that's the top 5 state races that we've been kind of keeping tabs on through tonight. Of course, you can stay up to date with all of the election numbers as they come in at KTVB.com, so keep watching that through the rest of the night. Dr. Witt, thank you very much for joining us this evening and walking us through this. It has been an historic night when it comes to a Republican primary here in the state of Idaho for sure. Again, thank you for joining us for our election coverage. Chief Political Reporter Joe Paris. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the 208. And be sure to wake up and watch Wake Up Idaho tomorrow morning. And of course, there you will get the latest election results and numbers. Have a good rest of the night.